Hey guys, so I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to try to see if I can walk you through one of the Ready book lessons um, and maybe save some class time. So if you guys are ready for this lesson, this is designed for you so that I'm kind of here with you through it, but you're also working on your own. So here we go. Let's walk through this together. Ready lesson 15 has to do with determining word meanings. Now, it's not just a straight up vocab lesson. Actually, what we're going to talk about is how figurative language impacts the different meanings of words. So here we go. Your friend sighs and says, I told you that a million times. Does this mean that your friend actually told you the same thing 1 million times? Of course not. This expression is hyperbole, and if I were you, I would, even though it's bold-faced, I'd underline it. So that expression, I've told you a million times, excuse my handwriting, is hyperbole or an exaggeration. Just like I'm so hungry I can eat a horse. Obviously, most people are not going to eat an actual horse, but they're trying to get a point across. They're trying to get the point across that they are super hungry, and they're doing it with hyperbole. Now, phrases like this are examples of figurative language, and that is a creative use of words to express more than the literal or usual meaning. Now, if something's not literal, it's not exactly as it is. For example, if it is literally freezing, and a lot of people use this incorrectly, if it's literally freezing, the thermostat should read 32 degrees. It should actually be freezing. Now, figurative language uses words in a way that's not literal. It's not to be taken at face value. And here are some examples of different types of figurative language that you're going to come across in the novel and in this actual lesson. So authors use figurative language to create unusual or interesting effects. I'm going to underline that and put a star next to it because it's important. This is the reason why authors use figurative language. They could just write a book and say everything just as is, but instead they choose to use figurative language, or they may choose to use figurative language. Now, here are the 3 examples that this lesson is going to focus on. First one is simile. And most of you, based on what I've heard from you this year, are familiar with what a simile is. And just as a refresher, simile is a comparison of 2 unlike things that uses like or as. This is your key here. If you get your similes and your metaphors mixed up, the clue for a simile is that it uses like or as. Miss Carol is as cool as ice. Obviously, that's a simile. I'm comparing myself to ice just to show how cool I am. All right, the next one is a metaphor. Metaphor is actually similar to a simile, but it is slightly different. It's a comparison of 2 unlike things without the use of like or as. And some example would be her eyes are the ocean. Not the best example, certainly could be far more clever, but in this case I'm comparing her eyes to the ocean. So I'm either saying that she's really deep or just like the ocean, her eyes are pretty. I'm comparing those 2 to create that effect. The last type of figurative language that we want to be familiar with is personification. And again, this is probably just a refresher, but if you're unclear about what personification is, there's a big clue for you. Personification. So there's the word person in there. And when authors use personification, they give human qualities to something non-human. For example, this pen. Pen's not human. If I were to say that this pen is dancing across the page, I'm personifying the pen. Humans can dance, pens cannot. Therefore, that's an example of personification. All right. If you have any questions, pause here and you can ask. Otherwise, we'll keep going. So your next step is to look at this cartoon. And this cartoon here, as you can see, is some dude standing on a stage and he's speaking some lines from Shakespeare. Shakespeare, super famous playwright, died a long, long time ago, wrote a bunch of stuff, and he was into using lots and lots and lots and lots of figurative language. Now this quote reads, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. Now, this word merely means only. Please excuse that extra curve there. This is harder to do than it looks. So all the world is stage and all the men and women only players. Now here's what we have to do with this. In the cartoon, circle the things that are being compared. Well, in the first line, the world is being compared to a stage. A stage like in a theater, like the one we have in the auditorium. In the second line, the men and the women are being compared to players or actors. All right, cool. Job done. Then decide how these things are alike. Check your answers against the chart below. Fill out the empty cell. All right, so we're being told that the first one's a metaphor, right? When he says all the world is stage, that means that he's comparing the world to a stage. And the whole point of that is for him to convey that life is like a play. We know that literally not all the world can be an actual stage, but he's just trying to make the point that our lives are like plays. The next line, men and women are merely players. What's being compared? He's comparing the people, you, me, or your other teachers, your friends, whoever, to actors, those that would be on a stage. And what he means by this is that just like actors, everyone has their own role to play. Whoa, that is super messy. So some people are meant to be teachers, some people are meant to be basketball players, some people are meant to be scientists, some people are always dramatic. You get the point. So just like the world can be compared to a stage, and that life is just like one big play, people can be like actors, and every person kind of has their own specific role in this big stage to play. That looks like pray. It is play. All right. If you have any questions, pause here and ask or continue. All right. So now we're on to the next page. Now, don't be scared off by this poem. Now, this is a Shakespearean sonnet. Shakespeare wrote a lot of plays, I think something like 36, and he wrote a lot of sonnets. This happens to be sonnet number 18. Okay, now a sonnet actually has a super specific rhyme scheme, and if we get time to, we'll go over that. There's actually a repeating rhyme pattern, and there's this cool little thing at the end called a rhyming couplet. And that just means that the last two lines share the same end rhyme. C and D. It's a rhyming couplet with a C. All right, so with Shakespeare, first of all, don't be scared off. He just said a bunch of simple things in a much less simple way, and because it's art, he just wanted to sound fancy. So we know going into this, because the Ready Book gives us this information, that this sonnet is one in which he compares the person he loves to a summer's day. Now, I've told you that you can't always assume that the poet is the speaker. In this case, it's probably more of a safe bet that Shakespeare was the speaker. At any rate, let's just go ahead and call the he the speaker, the voice in the poem. And we know that they're talking to the person that they love. And what they're doing is comparing that person to a summer's day. Now, when you think of summer, you probably think of good things, right? The pool, hanging out with your friends, warm days, good weather. So for the fact that he wants to compare this person to a summer's day is a pretty flattering comparison. There's a nice reason behind it. So let's see how he actually does this. So he starts off by saying, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" Thee, now remember, with Shakespeare, we're kicking it super old school. So what he means here is just you. Shall I compare you to a summer's day? This is a rhetorical question. He's just using this to start to make this comparison. He doesn't expect this person to actually answer. So then he says, "Thou art more lovely and more temperate." Thou, in olden times, was just simply you. Art was just a more fancy way of saying are. So he's just telling his person, his, whatever, lady friend, whoever, that you are more lovely and more temperate. Temperate means mild. Not too hot, not too cold, just beautiful. Then he goes on to say, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. So even May, as beautiful as May, the month of may be, there are times where rough winds come and kind of shake things up. And he continues to say, and summer's lease hath, another word for has, all too short a date. So even though May can be rough at times, and even though summer is too short, really, this person, I mean, these two things are not perfect, right? May has these rough winds. Summer, in and of itself, is too short. But this person that he's talking to is even better than May, which is pretty fantastic anyway. And they're even better than all of summer, because summer has an end to it. Let's continue. Sometimes too hot, the eye of heaven shines. So sometimes it's too warm, right? The eye of heaven, what would that be? Eye of heaven. Think about it. If heaven's in the sky, what would the eye be? What gives it its warmth? You might be thinking, I hope you're thinking, the sun. So sometimes it's just too hot. And often is his gold complexion dim. So even the sky's gold complexion, even beautiful nature, can be less beautiful. Oops, hello. And every fair from fair sometimes declines. So even beauty, right? The word fair here means beauty. Every sort of beautiful thing sometimes declines. So even the most beautiful things can become less beautiful. And then he explains how. He says that beautiful things can become less beautiful by chance, that just means by accident, or nature's changing course and trimmed. So by chance, by accident, or by time, beautiful things can become less beautiful. But, and put a star here because this is important. This is where there's going to be a change. If you see something like that, a but, a yet, however, that should be a clue to you that whatever's been said up to this point is going to differ from what's being said from this point on. So he says, but your eternal summer shall not fade. So whoever this person is, they possess this eternal summer. They are forever beautiful, and that's never going to go away. Nor will they lose possession of that fair thou owest. So they're never going to lose their beauty, right? Fair, in this case, we're equating to beauty. There we go. Thou, if you remember, means you, and owest in this case is just own. So you're never going to lose that beauty. You're never going to lose that wonderfulness that you have. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Not even death can take away the wonder of this person that he's talking to. When in eternal lines to time thou growest. Now, eternal, remember, means forever. And Shakespeare's saying here, or speaker saying here, that he's written these eternal lines. Because this is written on a page, that beauty is forever preserved on this page, right? This sonnet is from hundreds of years ago, and yet this person, the person that the speaker's talking to, is still just as beautiful because they're preserved in these pages. I have a super ugly hand. All right, now let's get to the last two lines. So long as men can breathe, their eyes can see, which really just means so forever, right? Hopefully men will forever continue to breathe and eyes will always be able to see. For long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So pretty much, this person's beauty will last forever, especially because it's now been written down in this poem. All right. If you have any questions, pause here, ask, or rewind. Otherwise, let's go down to the chart. All right. So for this particular chart, we have to identify, let's see if this is any better. For this particular